Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a close look at one of the New Testament's most powerful and I think practical pieces of writing, the first letter of Peter. Our sources call this text a spiritual tonic, and our mission today is to really understand why. It's written for people navigating a hostile world, facing suffering and needing a real reason to hold on to joy. We're going to distill that core message for you.
Right. And Peter's audience, they were Christians scattered across Asia Minor, persecuted people, but they're described as walking with their feet in the valley, but their hearts were just fixed on heaven.
Mm,
Their whole focus was on this secured heavenly inheritance, not on, what the world thought of them. And that distinction really defines the entire letter.
that sets the stage perfectly. So here's our plan. We'll start with the historical facts. Who wrote this? Who was it for? Then we'll get into its huge theological foundation of grace and hope.
And finally, the really practical stuff. The powerful ethical instruction Peter gives for how to live a holy life when the culture around you just completely rejects you.
Let's start with authorship. The traditional view, which is backed up by early church fathers like Polycarp and Irenaeus, it points straight to the Apostle Peter. Seems simple, but there's a pretty significant historical objection, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It's a compelling challenge, and it was raised mainly by some 19th century liberal theologians. Werner Kummel is a big name here.
Okay.
They looked at the language. I mean, the Greek is impeccable, and he uses the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, just masterfully. And they asked, how could Peter, the simple fisherman from Galilee, possibly write this?
Yeah, that seems like a tough hurdle. I mean, if the Greek is that refined, how does the traditional view even hold up?
Well, it relies on two really powerful points. First, Peter was from Galilee. And Galilee wasn't some backwater. It was very cosmopolitan, lots of Hellenistic influence. He would have spoken Greek,
So he would have been bilingual at least.
for sure. But the second point is the clincher. Peter says right in the letter that he used Silvanus, Silas from the book of Acts, as his agent.
Ah, so like a scribe.
An amanuensis, exactly. And Silvanus wasn't just anybody. He was a respected church leader, a prophet, and, this is important, a Roman citizen. So it's very likely Silvanus handled let's say, the elegant Greek composition, while Peter provided the actual content and oversight.
That makes perfect sense.
Well,
This
don't ask.
resolves the whole linguistic problem.
Okay.
Okay, so what about the recipients? He calls them exiles and dispersed.
Right. Scattered across 5 provinces of Asia Minor: Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. These were regions that Paul's early missions hadn't really touched much.
And he uses some very specific words to describe them.
He does, and those words define their whole situation. First, he calls them paroikos, which means exiles or temporary residents. And this isn't just about geography.
It's about identity.
It's their core identity. It means you're far from your true home, and your thoughts are always going back to your true homeland. It frames the world as a bridge, not a permanent house.
I love that. The world is a bridge, not a house. What's the other term he uses?
He calls them the eklektos, the elect. This just hammers home the idea of divine initiation. Their faith wasn't something they worked up themselves. It was God's choice. From before the foundation of the world, they were chosen.
And the timing on this letter. The sources put it around 63 AD.
Just before Nero's huge persecution really kicked off in 64 AD, so you can feel that threat of suffering just under the surface of the whole letter.
And what about the location? He says he's writing from Babylon.
Yeah, and the overwhelmingly accepted view from guys like Eusebius and Jerome all the way to today is that Babylon is a code word, a metaphor for Rome.
Right, because Babylon in the Old Testament was the great enemy of God's people.
Exactly. And with persecution starting up, using a coat name for the center of imperial power was just prudent. It protected the church there. And of course, Peter was eventually martyred in Rome, which fits perfectly.
Okay, so with that history locked in, let's turn to the message itself.
Yeah.
This letter is dense.
It really is. Theologian Edmund Clowney called it the most condensed summary of Christian faith and conduct in the whole New Testament. It's just extraordinarily rich.
And it wastes no time, does it? It jumps right into the deep end, laying out the role of the triune God in salvation. How does he pull that off so concisely?
He describes it as this unified Trinitarian effort. He says the Father chooses according to his foreknowledge, his, proactive determination.
Okay.
Then the Son redeems with his blood. That's the cause of salvation.
On the Spirit.
The Holy Spirit sanctifies. He applies that salvation to you, sets you apart for God. It's a work that goes from eternity past right into your present life.
Building on that, Peter then introduces this idea of a living hope. That sounds active, not passive, not wishful thinking.
It's totally guaranteed because it's rooted in two things you can't shape. First, the believer's spiritual rebirth or regeneration. But second, and this is critical, it's secured by the historical fact of the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
The ultimate proof.
The ultimate proof that Christ's work was accepted. It makes our hope vibrant, alive.
And that hope is looking forward to this future inheritance.
Mm.
Peter uses 3 very specific words to describe it.
He does, and they're incredible. He says it's first, incorruptible, afterton. It doesn't perish or decay. It has no seeds of its own destruction.
Okay, so it lasts forever?
Then it's immaculate, amiantos. Absolutely clean, no stain, no contamination.
Wow.
And third, it's unfading, amarantos. This means it never wilts or loses its beauty, like a flower that's perpetually fresh.
An incorruptible, immaculate, unfading inheritance. I mean, that's a treasure worth waiting for, especially if you're living under a death threat. But how can a fragile person in a hostile world be sure they'll actually get it? What's the guarantee?
Peter gives this magnificent military guarantee. He says believers are guarded by the power of God. The Greek word there is phuron. It means to be garrisoned or secured by a sentry.
Like a military guard post.
Exactly. The security isn't in your hands because you might stumble. It's in God's omnipotent power acting as the sentry of your life.
That is reassuring. But it does raise a question I have to ask. If salvation is so secure, garrisoned, guaranteed, reserved in heaven, why does Peter spend the rest of the letter telling them to try so hard to be holy? Isn't that a mixed message?
And that's the genius of the letter. Peter shows that true security breeds motivation, not laziness. It's because you have this future glory locked in that it demands a life that reflects the God who chose you.
Doctrine flows into duty.
That's it, which takes us right into the ethical sections.
Okay, so this quest for holiness, Peter doesn't start with actions, but with internal preparation. He gives 3 mental disciplines.
They're absolutely mental training. First, he says, gird your understanding. It's an old analogy, like tying up your loose robes before you run or fight.
So you don't trip over your own thoughts.
Exactly. Maintain mental focus. Don't let flighty ideas distract you from the truth.
Mental readiness. What's number 2?
Be sober. The Greek is nephantes. It means maintain full rational control. It's not just about avoiding alcohol. It's about rejecting any kind of mental confusion, thinking clearly and calmly.
And the third one points us back to the future again.
Yes. Focus your hope entirely on grace. We're looking forward to the fullness of grace that comes when Christ returns, the parousia. And that future hope should govern everything we do today.
So once you're mentally prepared, Peter tells them to start stripping off sin like taking off dirty clothes. He lists 5 sins, and they're all about how they treat each other.
Right. This is a catalog of vices, and it's all about what destroys community, especially under pressure. You've got wickedness, which is the intent to harm someone.
Yeah.
Deceit, being two-faced, using treachery. Hypocrisy acting, wearing a mask. Envy, wanting what someone else has. And finally, slander or malicious talk.
That list is a perfect picture of toxic relationships then and now. So after you strip all that off, what nourishment does he recommend to sustain this new life?
He uses one of the most vivid analogies in the letter, the spiritual diet. He says you must desire pure spiritual milk, the Word of God, with the same intense craving as a newborn baby.
Who acts like its very survival depends on that next meal.
Precisely. This pure spiritual food is the only way to grow. It is a matter of spiritual survival.
So let's shift to how this holiness plays out in the world, starting with the cornerstone, Jesus himself. Peter says he's the foundation, but for those who reject him, he's a stumbling stone.
And that leads Peter to define the believer's corporate identity. He just elevates their status dramatically. He calls the church a chosen race, a royal priesthood.
Which means all believers are priests, right? Not just a special class.
Exactly. Direct access to God for everyone. And finally, God's exclusive possession.
And what's the purpose of having this incredible high status?
The purpose is sublime. To proclaim God's virtues, his power, his glory, his grace to the world. Our lives, our conduct are supposed to be the irresistible argument for faith.
And this leads right into one of the most difficult commands in the New Testament, radical submission, even to harsh authorities. Why would he command submission to a government like Nero's, which was so unjust?
It seems so counterintuitive, doesn't it? Especially for people being persecuted. But Peter says to submit for the Lord's sake, not because the government is good or divine. It's about the reputation of Christ in the world.
Yeah.
The whole point of their good conduct is to silence the ignorance of the senseless.
So their good works become a defense against false accusations. It proves they're suffering for Christ, not for being criminals.
Exactly right. And he gives this profound paradox. He says, live as free people, but don't use that freedom as an excuse for wickedness. In Peter's mind, true freedom is found when you willingly submit yourself as a servant of God.
This all becomes critical when he turns to the letter's central theme, suffering. He tells them not to be surprised by the burning fire sent to test them.
Yeah, as if it were some strange thing. The surprise isn't the suffering, but the reason for it. It's pedagogical. Peter says it's like a refiner's fire. It burns away impurities and proves that your faith is genuine,
More precious than gold.
which is perishable, right?
Right.
So the suffering is temporary, and its goal is praise and glory and honor when Christ returns. And his inscription is to rejoice in it because it means you're sharing the same path as Christ.
That is a total reversal of how the world thinks. So since the end is near, what are the active, practical things he tells them to do?
Since time is short, he gives 3 responses. First, be sober and pray. Second, practice active, intense love. The word is ektones. It demands all your spiritual energy because that kind of love covers a multitude of sins.
That doesn't mean ignoring sin, right?
No, not at all. It means refusing to expose it or magnify it or, take pleasure in someone else's faults.
And the third response is about using their spiritual gifts.
Yes. Be hospitable without grumbling. Serve one another with your specific gifts, whether it's ministry of the word, like teaching, or ministry of service, like practical help. All of it has one goal, that God may be glorified in all things.
So we come to the end of the letter. What's Peter's closing encouragement?
He closes with this powerful reminder about the God of all grace. His promise isn't that you won't suffer, it's that he will transform it. After you've suffered for a little while, he will perfect you, firm you up, fortify you, and ground you.
So the essential takeaway for you, the listener, is this direct flow. Everything, the election, redemption, the holy conduct, even the suffering, it all starts in God's grace and it all ends in God's glory.
That's the entire message. Suffering is just that brief, necessary catalyst in the middle.
Let's leave you with a final thought built on what Peter says. The early church's mission was sublime, to proclaim God's virtues to a hostile world. Their good works were meant to make that world glorify God on the day of visitation.
So, considering the immense effort and authentic conduct they needed to prove their faith while being actively persecuted, what level of pure, scrutinized conduct should you pursue today, knowing your life is just as carefully watched by the world around you?